I was standing in my vegetable garden pulling weeds from between the tomato plants when I heard the sound of gravel crunching in my driveway. The late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the fields, and I could smell the sweet scent of hay drying in the barn. After 43 years on this land, I knew every sound, every season, every inch of soil like it was part of my own body. What I didn't know was that in the next 10 minutes, my entire world would crumble. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The car door slammed with more force than usual. I looked up to see my daughter Emma walking toward me, but something was different. Her usual warm smile was replaced by a tight, nervous expression, and behind her, my son-in-law Derek emerged from the passenger seat with a manila folder clutched in his hands. They'd been married for 3 years now, and I'd grown to love Derek like the son I never had. He was ambitious, hard-working, and seemed to genuinely care for Emma. But the look on his face today made my stomach twist with unease. Emma cleared her throat as she approached. "Mom, we need to talk." Her voice carried a formality that felt foreign, like she was speaking to a business associate rather than the woman who had raised her on this very farm. Derek stood slightly behind her, his jaw set in a way that reminded me of a lawyer delivering bad news. I wiped my dirt-covered hands on my jeans and straightened up, my lower back protesting after hours of garden work. At 62, I wasn't as spry as I used to be, but I still managed every acre of this 300-acre farm myself. Well, almost myself. Emma and Derek had been helping more and more over the past year, taking over the books, handling vendor relationships, managing the seasonal workers. I'd been grateful for their help, especially since my arthritis had been acting up. "What's going on, sweetheart?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew this conversation wasn't going to end well. Derek stepped forward and opened the folder. "Ruth, we've been thinking about the future of the farm, and we believe it's time to make some changes." His voice was steady, practiced, like he'd rehearsed this speech. "The property needs significant upgrades to remain profitable. New irrigation systems, updated equipment, modernized facilities. We're talking about a substantial investment." I nodded slowly. We'd discussed this before. The farm had been in my family for 4 generations, passed down from my great-grandfather, who'd bought the land in 1924. My parents had worked it until they died, and I'd taken over when I was just 25. Emma had grown up here, learned to drive tractors before she could properly reach the pedals, spent summers helping with harvest. This land was our legacy. "I know the numbers, Derek," I said. "I've been running this place for nearly 4 decades. What exactly are you proposing?" Emma finally spoke up, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Mom, Derek and I think it would be best if you transferred ownership to us now, rather than waiting. We can get started on the improvements immediately, and you won't have to worry about the financial burden. You can focus on enjoying your retirement." The words hit me like a physical blow. Retirement. As if I were some tired old woman ready to be put out to pasture. I looked around at the fields I'd nurtured, the barn I'd helped rebuild after the tornado in 2018, the farmhouse where I'd raised Emma and where her grandmother had raised me. This wasn't just a business to be transferred. This was my life. "I'm not ready to retire," I said carefully, "and I'm certainly capable of making my own decisions about improvements." Derek's expression hardened slightly. "Ruth, with all due respect, you're not getting any younger. The physical demands of farming are substantial, and Emma and I are in a better position to handle the day-to-day operations. We've already started taking over most of the management duties anyway." There was something in his tone that made my skin crawl, a condescension that suggested they'd already made this decision without me. I looked at Emma, searching her face for any sign of the daughter who used to run to me when she skinned her knees, who cried in my arms when her high school boyfriend broke her heart, who hugged me tight when she announced her engagement. "Emma, is this really what you want?" I asked. She finally looked at me, but her eyes were distant. "Mom, it makes sense. Derek has an MBA in agricultural business. He understands modernization in ways that..." She trailed off, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. In ways that I finished for her. Derek jumped in quickly. We're not saying you don't understand farming, Ruth. We're saying the business side has evolved. Marketing, distribution, sustainable practices, government regulations, it's become increasingly complex. I felt a flash of anger. I'd been navigating government regulations and market fluctuations since before Derek was born. I'd survived droughts, floods, economic downturns, and changing agricultural policy. I'd modernized irrigation systems, implemented crop rotation programs, and built relationships with distributors that had kept this farm profitable for decades. But what hurt more than the condescension was the look on Emma's face. She genuinely seemed to believe that I was incapable of continuing to run my own farm. What exactly are you asking for? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Derek pulled papers from the folder. We've had an attorney draft a transfer of ownership agreement. You'd retain lifetime residence rights in the farmhouse, of course, and we'd pay you a monthly stipend, but legal ownership and operational control would transfer to Emma and me. Immediately, I stared at the documents without taking them. A stipend, on my own land. It's a generous arrangement, Derek continued. You'd have no financial responsibilities, no operational stress. You could focus on your garden, maybe take up some hobbies, travel if you want. The patronizing tone was unmistakable now. They weren't asking for my partnership or input. They were asking me to step aside and become a dependent in my own home. I need to think about this, I said. Emma's face fell. Mom, we were hoping to get this settled today. Derek has meetings with contractors next week, and we need to move quickly on the irrigation project if we want to be ready for spring planting. Next week, I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. You've already arranged meetings with contractors. Derek at least had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. We wanted to be prepared. If you agree to the transfer, we need to act fast, take advantage of the growing season. I looked between them. These two people I loved and trusted, and realized they'd been planning this for months. The increased involvement in farm operations, the gradual takeover of financial management, the subtle suggestions that I should take it easier. It hadn't been them helping me. It had been them positioning themselves to replace me. I said I need to think about it. I repeated, my voice colder now. Derek's jaw tightened. Ruth, I'm trying to be respectful here, but the farm is struggling financially. The equipment is outdated. The irrigation system is failing. And without significant investment, this place won't be profitable much longer. Emma and I are offering to take on that burden. Struggling financially, I couldn't hide my shock. According to what number? Emma looked uncomfortable. Mom, Derek's been analyzing the books. The profit margins are declining, and the infrastructure needs are substantial. I felt a chill run down my spine. Derek had indeed been handling more of the bookkeeping lately, but I still reviewed everything. The farm was doing fine, not exceptionally well but solidly profitable. We'd had a good harvest last year, and our contracts with local distributors were secure. I want to see those numbers, I said. Derek hesitated. They're complex financial projections. I'm not sure I'd what? My voice was sharp now. Understand my own farm's finances. Emma put her hand on Derek's arm, a warning gesture. Mom, please don't take this personally. We're trying to help, but it felt deeply personal. It felt like my own daughter and son-in-law were treating me like an incompetent old woman who needed to be managed and controlled. I'll look over the paperwork, I said finally, but I'm not making any decisions today. Derek's expression darkened. Ruth, we really need to move forward with this. The timing is critical. The timing is critical for what, exactly? Emma and Derek exchanged a look, and in that moment, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Guilt. They were hiding something from me. We'll talk more tomorrow, I said firmly. Right now, I need some time to process this. Derek looked like he wanted to argue, but Emma tugged on his sleeve. Okay, Mom. We'll come by tomorrow afternoon. They walked back to their car, and I watched them drive away, their headlights disappearing down the dirt road that led to the main highway. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, that usually filled me with peace. Tonight, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. They just looked ominous. I went inside the farmhouse and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where my mother had taught me to snap green beans, where I'd helped Emma with her homework, where I'd signed the papers to take out loans for new equipment and weathered every crisis this farm had faced. The silence felt different now, heavy with uncertainty. Something was wrong. Derek's urgency, Emma's evasiveness, the financial projections I hadn't seen. I walked to my home office, a small room off the kitchen where I kept all the farm records. Everything looked normal, but when I opened the filing cabinet where I kept the current year's financial documents, I noticed something strange. Several folders were thinner than they should have been. I pulled out the bank statements folder. It should have contained 12 months of statements, but there were only 8. The most recent 4 months were missing. I checked the tax documents folder. Several forms were gone. The vendor contracts folder was nearly empty. My hands started shaking as I realized what had been happening. Derek hadn't just been helping with the books. He'd been systematically removing documents from my files. I spent the next 3 hours going through every file, every folder, every document in my office. The pattern became clear. Derek had been taking original copies of financial records, contracts, and legal documents. What remained were incomplete files that would make it nearly impossible for me to prove the farm's actual financial status or my ownership of various assets. But Derek had made one crucial mistake. I'd been keeping backup copies of everything in a safety deposit box at the bank, a habit my father had taught me decades ago. The next morning, I drove to town and retrieved those documents. What I found made my stomach turn. The farm wasn't struggling at all. In fact, our profit margins had increased over the past 2 years, thanks largely to new contracts Derek had negotiated with organic food distributors. But according to the paperwork he'd shown Emma, we were barely breaking even. He'd been creating false financial reports, showing inflated expenses and reduced revenues. More disturbing were the documents I found that I'd never seen before. Derek had been using the farm's credit line to make purchases I knew nothing about, equipment that had never arrived, consulting services that had never been provided, improvement projects that had never been completed. Over the past 6 months, he'd siphoned nearly $40,000 from the farm's account. I sat in my car outside the bank, staring at the evidence of my son-in-law's betrayal. But what hurt even more was realizing that Emma had to know at least some of this. She'd been present for many of the conversations about farm finances. She'd signed some of the documents as a witness. My own daughter had been complicit in deceiving me. That afternoon, I called my attorney, James Morrison, who'd been handling my legal affairs for over 20 years. I explained the situation and faxed him copies of the evidence I'd found. "Ruth," he said after reviewing everything, "this is serious. What Derek's done constitutes fraud and embezzlement. You could press criminal charges. What about the transfer of ownership they want me to sign?" "Absolutely do not sign anything," he said firmly. "Based on what you've shown me, they're trying to force you off your own land using money they've stolen from you. This is elder abuse. Plain and simple, elder abuse." The words stung, but they were accurate. My own family was trying to manipulate me into giving up everything I'd worked for my entire life. "What are my options?" I asked. "Several," James replied. "We can file criminal charges against Derek for fraud and embezzlement. We can pursue civil action to recover the stolen funds, and we can ensure that your ownership of the farm is absolutely protected. But Ruth, I have to ask, are you prepared for this to destroy your relationship with Emma?" I closed my eyes, thinking about the little girl who used to ride on my shoulders through the cornfields, who helped me feed the chickens every morning, who promised she'd never leave the farm. That little girl was gone, replaced by a woman who was willing to steal from her own mother. "She made that choice when she decided to betray me," I said quietly. That evening, Emma and Derek returned as promised. I was waiting for them in the living room. The transfer documents, Derek had given me spread out on the coffee table along with the evidence I'd gathered. Emma smiled as they walked in. But Derek's expression was tense. He probably expected me to have signed the papers by now, eager to get this charade over with. "Hi, Mom," Emma said, settling onto the couch across from me. "Have you had a chance to review everything?" "Oh, I've reviewed quite a bit," I said calmly. "In fact, I've learned some very interesting things about our farm's finances." Derek's face went pale. "What do you mean?" I picked up the bank statements I'd retrieved from the safety deposit box. "I mean these statements, which show our actual financial position, quite different from the projections you showed Emma yesterday. Aren't they?" Emma looked confused. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that Derek has been stealing from this farm for months," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "I'm talking about false financial reports, forged documents, and embezzled funds." Derek started to stand up. "Ruth, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Sit down," I said sharply. "The only misunderstanding was mine. Thinking I could trust you." I spread out the evidence methodically, explaining each discrepancy, each forged document, each stolen dollar. Emma's face grew paler with each revelation, and Derek sat frozen, knowing he'd been caught. "Derek," Emma whispered, "is this true?" He looked at her with desperate eyes. "Emma, I can explain. The farm needed improvements, and your mother was being stubborn about modernizing. I was trying to create a financial picture that would motivate her to make necessary changes." "By stealing $40,000? I asked. "It wasn't stealing," he said quickly. "It was reinvestment in the farm's future. Every penny went toward improving operations." I pulled out another folder. "Really? Because I have receipts here for equipment that was never delivered, consulting services that were never provided, and improvement projects that exist only on paper." "Where exactly did that money go, Derek?" He couldn't answer, and Emma was staring at him like she'd never seen him before. "You lied to me," she said quietly. "You told me the farm was failing. You said Mom was being irresponsible with money. You made me believe she couldn't handle things anymore." "Emma, please." Derek reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I was trying to protect our future. Your mother is getting older, and she's not equipped to handle modern agricultural business. I was trying to position us to take over before the farm really did start failing. By lying to both of us," Emma's voice was rising now, "by stealing from my mother, I was going to pay it back," Derek said desperately. "Once we took over operations, I would have made sure every dollar was accounted for." I felt a cold satisfaction watching his carefully constructed plan fall apart. "Unfortunately, Derek, that's not going to happen. You see, I've already spoken with my attorney and filed a police report. You're going to pay back every stolen dollar, and you're both going to leave this farm tonight." Emma's head snapped toward me. "Mom, you can't be serious. I'm your daughter. This is my home too." "Your home?" I stood up, 37 years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. "You stood in my garden yesterday and told me I was too old and incompetent to run my own farm. You tried to trick me into signing away everything I've worked for my entire life. You participated in a scheme to steal from me and manipulate me. This stopped being your home the moment you chose him over the woman who raised you." Emma started to cry. "Mom, I didn't know about the money. I thought Derek was trying to help. I thought you really were struggling, but you never asked me directly, did you?" I said. "You never came to me with your concerns or tried to understand the situation. You just decided I was incompetent and needed to be managed." Derek was looking around the room frantically, probably calculating how much trouble he was in. "Ruth, surely we can work this out. I'll pay back the money. Emma and I will move out. But you can't destroy our marriage over a misunderstanding." "I'm not destroying your marriage," I said quietly. "You did that yourself when you turned my daughter into an accomplice in elder abuse." Emma was sobbing now, but I felt no sympathy. The betrayal cut too deep, hurt too much. For months, they'd been planning to steal my life's work while pretending to care about my well-being. I want you both off this property within the hour. I said, your personal belongings can be collected later. Under supervision, but you're not spending another night under my roof. Derek stood up. Abruptly, fine. But this isn't over, Ruth. You can't run this place forever. And when you fail, don't come crying to us for help. His mask had finally slipped completely, revealing the manipulative, entitled man he really was. Emma looked at him in shock, probably seeing him clearly for the first time. Get out, I said quietly, both of you. Now. Emma stood up slowly, tears streaming down her face. Mom, please, can't we talk about this? I made a mistake. But I'm still your daughter. I looked at her. This woman I'd loved more than my own life, who'd been willing to steal that life away from me. You stopped being my daughter when you decided I was better off as a dependent in my own home. You'll always be the child I raised, Emma. But you're not my family anymore. She flinched like I'd struck her. But I felt no regret. They'd made their choice when they decided to betray me. Derek grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her toward the door. Come on, Em. We don't need this. We'll figure something else out. As they walked out, Emma turned back one more time. Mom, I love you. Please don't do this. I love you too, I said quietly. That's why this hurts so much. The door closed behind them, and I heard their car start up and drive away. The silence that followed felt different from the night before, not heavy with uncertainty, but clean with resolution. I walked through the farmhouse, turning off lights and checking locks. In Emma's old room, I found clothes in the closet, and photos on the dresser, evidence of the daughter who used to live here, before she became someone I didn't recognize. I didn't cry that night. I was too angry, too betrayed, too determined to protect what was mine. But as I lay in bed, listening to the familiar sounds of the farm settling around me, I realized something had fundamentally changed. I was alone now in a way I'd never been before. The next morning, I woke early as I always did, and went out to check on the animal. The routine was comforting, grounding me in the reality of what mattered. The chickens needed to be fed. The horses needed fresh water. The fence in the north pasture needed repair. This land, these animals, this life I'd built, it was real in a way that family loyalty apparently wasn't. My phone rang as I was finishing the morning chores. It was James Morrison. Ruth, I have an update on the legal situation. The police have agreed to pursue charges against Derek for embezzlement and fraud. We should be able to recover most, if not all, of the stolen money. But there's something else you need to know. What? Derek has hired his own attorney, and they're claiming the money was taken with your implied consent as part of farm improvements. They're also suggesting you're not mentally competent to manage your affairs. I felt my jaw clench. They're trying to claim I'm senile. It's a common defense in elder abuse cases. They'll argue that you were confused about finances, and that Derek was acting in your best interests. It's nonsense, of course. But we need to be prepared for a fight. Then we'll fight, I said simply. I'm not letting them steal my farm and my reputation. Good. I'm also recommending we file a restraining order to keep them off the property. If they're willing to claim mental incompetence, they might try other tactics. Within hours of filing the restraining order, Emma called me, crying hysterically. Mom, you can't do this. You're my mother. I have nowhere else to go. You have a husband, I said coldly. Figure it out. Derek says we can't afford our own place right now because of the legal fees. Mom, please, I'm begging you. I made a mistake, but I'm trying to make it right by supporting his claim that I'm mentally incompetent. There was silence on the other end of the line. You are supporting it, aren't you? I continued. You're going to testify that your poor old mother is losing her mind and can't take care of herself. Mom, it's not like that. I hung up. That afternoon, a sheriff's deputy came to serve the restraining order paper. He found Derek and Emma parked at the end of my driveway, apparently trying to work up the courage to approach the house. Ma'am, the deputy told me afterward, they wanted me
to tell you they're staying at the Motel 6 in town if you change your mind about talking. I didn't change my mind. 3 days later, Derek's attorney called my attorney with a settlement offer. Derek would pay back half the stolen money and agree to stay away from the farm in exchange for dropped charges. In return, I would agree to a psychological evaluation to determine my competence to manage my affairs. What did you tell them? I asked James. I told them to go to hell, he said cheerfully, but in more professional language. Good. The case moved forward, and Derek's desperation became more apparent. He started calling my neighbors, telling them I was having memory problems and might be dangerous to myself. He contacted my doctor's office, claiming to be concerned about my mental health. He even called the county social services department to report a vulnerable adult in need of assistance. But Derek had underestimated me and overestimated his own intelligence. Every phone call, every false report, every attempt to manipulate the situation only strengthened my case against him. My attorney documented everything as evidence of harassment and continued abuse. The breakthrough came when my neighbor Tom Bradley called to tell me about a strange conversation he'd had with Derek. Ruth, that son-in-law of yours stopped by yesterday asking a lot of questions about your farm. Wanted to know about property values, what kind of offers you might have gotten from developers, whether you'd ever mentioned selling. When I told him you'd never said anything like that, he started hinting that you might not be thinking clearly anymore. What did you tell him? I told him you were sharper than most people half your age, and that he should mind his own business. But Ruth, he seemed real interested in the development angle, kept asking about that new shopping center they're building over in Millfield. After Tom left, I sat thinking about his words. Millfield was only 20 miles away, and the shopping center he mentioned was part of a larger development project that had been expanding outward from the city. I'd heard rumors that developers were looking for land in our area, but I'd never been approached directly. I called James Morrison. James, I need you to do some research for me, find out if there have been any recent inquiries about developing land in this area. Specifically, find out if anyone has been asking about my farm.
He called back the next day with news that made everything click into place. Ruth, you're not going to believe this. A development company called Hartwell Properties has been quietly buying up farmland in your township for the past year. They're planning a major retail and residential complex, and according to my sources, your property is right in the middle of their target area. Have they made any offers on my land? That's the interesting part. I found records of preliminary negotiations, but they weren't with you. They were with Derek Morrison, who identified himself as the farm's business manager. My blood ran cold. Derek has been negotiating to sell my farm. It looks like he's been representing himself as having authority to enter into agreements on your behalf. The development company thinks they have a deal pending for your property. They're expecting to finalize the sale within the next few months. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Derek hadn't just been stealing money from the farm accounts. He'd been trying to steal the entire farm. James, I need copies of every document related to these negotiations, and I need to know exactly what Derek promised them. The documents James obtained painted a clear picture of Derek's ultimate plan. He'd been positioning himself to gain legal control of the farm through the ownership transfer, then immediately sell the entire property to developers for $28 million. The monthly stipend he'd offered me was a fraction of what the land was actually worth, and it would have ended the moment the sale was completed. My daughter and son-in-law hadn't just been trying to steal my farm. They'd been trying to steal my farm and leave me homeless and penniless. That night, I sat in my kitchen with all the evidence spread out before me, and I finally cried. Not from sadness or self-pity, but from pure rage. They'd been planning to destroy my entire life while pretending to care about my well-being. They'd been willing to leave me with nothing while they walked away with millions. But as the tears dried, my resolve hardened. Derek had made one crucial mistake in his elaborate scheme. He'd underestimated the woman he was trying to cheat, and that mistake was going to cost him everything. I didn't sleep much that night, but I was up before dawn anyway, my mind racing with plans. The evidence James had gathered changed everything. This wasn't just about embezzlement anymore. Derek had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to steal my entire life's work, and Emma had been his willing accomplice. By 6 in the morning, I was dressed and sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of strong coffee and a yellow legal pad. I started making lists, evidence to gather, people to contact, legal strategies to discuss with James. But most importantly, I started planning my counterattack. Derek thought he was dealing with a confused old woman who could be easily manipulated. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. My first call was to my bank. I'd been doing business with First National for over 30 years, and the manager, Patricia Wells, knew me personally. "Patricia, I need to freeze all accounts that Derek Morrison has access to. Effective immediately," I said without preamble. "Of course, Ruth. Is everything all right?" "Everything will be once I stop a thief from stealing my farm." Within an hour, Derek's access to the farm's credit line was revoked. His signature was removed from all accounts, and any pending transactions he'd initiated were flagged for review. I also opened a new account that only I could access and transferred the farm's operating funds there. My second call was to every vendor, contractor, and service provider Derek had been working with. "This is Ruth Davis from Willowbrook Farm," I said to each one. "I'm calling to inform you that Derek Morrison no longer has authority to make purchases or enter into contracts on behalf of this farm. Any agreements you have with him are void, and any work performed without my direct authorization will not be paid for." The responses were illuminating. 3 contractors admitted they'd been planning to start projects Derek had approved but I'd never heard of. 2 equipment suppliers had orders on file that Derek had placed using the farm's credit. 1 landscaping company had been hired to improve the property's curb appeal in preparation for what Derek had described as a potential sale. Each conversation confirmed what I already knew. Derek had been systematically preparing to steal and sell my farm while keeping me completely in the dark. But the most revealing call came when I contacted the development company directly. "Hartwell Properties, this is Jennifer speaking. This is Ruth Davis, owner of Willowbrook Farm. I understand you've been in negotiations regarding my property." There was a pause. "Oh, Mrs. Davis," Mr. Morrison said, "you might call." He explained that you've been having some difficulties understanding the business arrangements. My jaw clenched. "Mr. Morrison has been lying to you. He has no authority to negotiate any sale of my property. I am the sole owner of this farm. I am mentally competent, and my property is not for sale." Another pause. Longer this time. "I think there may be some confusion here. Miss Morrison has been representing himself as your business manager with power of attorney. We have documents, forged documents," I interrupted. "Mr. Morrison is my son-in-law, and he's currently under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Any agreements you think you have with him are invalid." The woman's voice became very careful. "Mrs. Davis, perhaps we should schedule a meeting to clarify the situation." "There's nothing to clarify. My farm is not for sale, will not be for sale, and anyone who attempts to claim otherwise is committing fraud. I suggest you consult with your legal department." I hung up feeling grimly satisfied. Derek's house of cards was starting to collapse. That afternoon, Emma called again. Her voice was different this time, less pleading and more desperate. "Mom, please, you have to talk to me. Derek says you're trying to ruin our lives." "I'm protecting my life," I replied, something Derek should have considered before he decided to steal it. "It's not stealing if he was trying to help you. Help me by leaving me homeless and penniless while he walked away with millions. That's an interesting definition of help. What are you talking about?" Derek never said anything about millions. I felt a flicker of doubt. Was it possible Emma really didn't know about the development deal? "Emma, did Derek ever mention that developers wanted to buy this farm?" "No. He just said the farm needed improvements and that you were being stubborn about making changes. And you believed him instead of talking to me directly." Emma's voice faltered. "He said you were getting defensive about your age and that bringing it up would hurt your feelings. So you decided to ambush me with a demand that I sign over my property. We thought it would be easier if we presented it as a complete plan to steal my farm." "It wasn't stealing." Emma's voice rose. "We were trying to take care of you. By lying to me, manipulating me, and stealing from me. Derek said the money was just temporary. Emma, stop. I cut her off. Derek has been negotiating to sell this farm to developers for nearly $3 million. He's been planning to take ownership from me, and then immediately sell everything. The monthly stipend he offered me would have ended the moment the sale closed. He was planning to leave me with nothing. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had been dropped. Emma, that can't be true, she whispered. It is true. I have documentation of his negotiations with Hartwell Property. He's been representing himself as my business manager and promising them he could deliver the sale. But he told me, he said we would live here and run the farm together. He lied to you too, Emma, just like he lied to me. I heard her start to cry, and for a moment, my anger softened. Emma had been manipulated just as much as I had, though she'd been a willing participant in my manipulation. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about any development deal, but you knew about the embezzlement. I knew Derek was moving money around, but he said it was for improvement. He showed me receipts and invoices, fake receipts and invoices. I didn't know they were fake, because you didn't want to know, I said quietly. You wanted to believe your husband was a brilliant businessman who could solve all our problems. You wanted to believe I was too old and confused to handle my own affairs. It was easier than admitting that you'd married a con man. Don't say that, Emma. I love you. I will always love you. But you chose to participate in stealing from me, rather than having an honest conversation about your concerns. You chose Derek's version of events over your own mother's competence. Those choices have consequences. What do you want from me? I admitted I made a mistake. I said I was sorry. I want you to do the right thing. I want you to testify truthfully about what Derek did. I want you to stop supporting his claims that I'm mentally incompetent. I want you to help me prove that he's a thief and a liar. He's my husband, and I'm your mother, or I was, until you decided I was better off as your dependent than as your parent. Emma was crying harder now. I can't testify against Derek. It would destroy our marriage. Derek destroyed your marriage when he lied to you about his real plans for this farm. I'm just the messenger. Please, Mom, there has to be another way. There is, I said. Derek can confess, return every penny he stole, abandon any claim to this property, and disappear from our lives forever. Then maybe we can start rebuilding our relationship. You know he won't do that. Then you've chosen your side. I hung up feeling hollow. Part of me had hoped Emma would choose truth over loyalty to Derek, but I wasn't surprised by her decision. She'd been choosing Derek over me for months. The next morning brought a surprise visit from someone I hadn't expected to see. I was feeding the chickens when a black sedan pulled into my driveway. A woman in an expensive suit got out, followed by a man with a briefcase. Mrs. Davis, I'm Angela Hartwell from Hartwell Properties. This is my attorney, Robert Chen. We were hoping we could speak with you. I studied them carefully. Angela Hartwell was probably in her 50s, with silver hair and sharp eyes. She looked like someone accustomed to getting what she wanted. I believe I made my position clear on the phone yesterday, I said. You did, and that's why we're here. We need to understand exactly what's been happening. I gestured toward the farmhouse. Come inside, but I'm warning you up front. This farm is not for sale at any price. We sat in my living room, and Angela got straight to the point. Miss Davis, if what you told us yesterday is true, then Derek Morrison has been defrauding both you and us. We've invested significant time and money in due diligence based on his representations. What kind of representations? Robert Chen opened his briefcase and pulled out a fold. He provided us with what he claimed were financial records, showing the farm was failing. He showed us a power of attorney document giving him authority to act on your behalf. He even had what appeared to be your signature on a preliminary sales agreement. I looked at the documents they showed me, and my blood boiled. Derek had forged my signature on multiple papers, created fake financial statements, and even fabricated a power of attorney document. None of this is legitimate. I never signed any of these papers, and I never gave Derek power of attorney for anything. Angela and Robert exchanged glances. Mrs. Davis, Angela said carefully, we have a significant problem. Based on Derek's representations, we've already begun preliminary development work. We've filed rezoning applications,
commissioned environmental studies, and started preliminary design work. We're out nearly $200,000. That's unfortunate, but it's not my problem. You should have verified Derek's authority before spending money. We did verify it, Robert said. The documents he provided appeared legitimate. We had no reason to suspect fraud. You had every reason to verify ownership directly with me. Angela leaned forward. Mrs. Davis, I understand you're angry, and you have every right to be, but we're all victims of Derek Morrison's deception here. Perhaps we can find a solution that works for everyone. The solution is that you pursue Derek for your losses, and leave me alone. We intend to pursue Derek, Robert said, but given our investment in this project, we'd like to explore whether you might be interested in a legitimate sale. I already told you, this farm is not for sale. We understand you've been farming this land for decades, Angela continued. But at your age, surely you've considered retirement. We're prepared to offer you significantly more than Derek was planning to steal. Fair market value plus a substantial premium. I stood up abruptly. My age. You're the second group of people this week to suggest I'm too old to handle my own affairs. Let me be very clear. I am 62 years old. I am in excellent health. I am mentally sharp, and I am perfectly capable of running this farm for another 20 years if I choose to. Your con-man son-in-law may have convinced you that I'm some doddering old woman ready to be warehoused, but you're wrong. Angela raised her hands in a placating gesture. I apologize. I didn't mean to suggest. Yes, you did. You absolutely did. You came here assuming that once Derek's scheme fell apart, you could manipulate me into selling by suggesting retirement was inevitable. Well, here's what's inevitable. Derek is going to prison for fraud. You're going to lose the money you spent on illegal preliminary work, and my farm is going to stay exactly where it is. Robert tried a different approach. Mrs. Davis, we understand your attachment to this land. What if we structured a deal that allowed you to retain a portion of the property, perhaps the farmhouse and a few acres for your personal use? What part of not for sale don't you understand? Angela's friendly demeanor slipped slightly. Miss Davis, with all due respect, development in this area is inevitable. If not us, it will be someone else. You're sitting on prime real estate that's only going to become more valuable. Wouldn't you rather deal with a reputable company that's willing to negotiate fairly? Are you threatening me? Not at all. I'm simply pointing out economic reality. Here's reality, I said, walking to the door and opening it. This farm has been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandfather built this life from nothing. My grandparents and parents preserved it through the Depression and 2 wars, and I've spent 40 years making it thrive. It will take more than some developers and a con-man's son-in-law to separate me from my legacy. They left, but not before Angela handed me her card. If you change your mind, Mrs. Davis, please call me. We can make this worth your while. After they were gone, I called James Morrison immediately. James, I just had a visit from Hartwell Property. They're trying to buy the farm legitimately now, but they're also making it sound like development is inevitable, whether I sell or not. That's a common pressure tactic. What did you tell them? I told them to go to hell, but more politely than Derek's settlement offer. James chuckled. Good. Ruth, there's something you should know. Derek's attorney called this morning with a new offer. He's willing to plead guilty to misdemeanor fraud in exchange for paying back the money and avoiding jail time. Misdemeanor. He stole $40,000 and tried to steal a $3 million farm. I know, I told them we weren't interested, but Ruth, they're getting desperate. That usually means they're about to try something stupid. What kind of stupid? I don't know yet, but keep your guard up and make sure you have someone checking on you regularly. That evening I called my neighbor Tom Bradley and asked if he could keep an eye on the farm for the next few days. I didn't tell him why, but Tom had been farming longer than I had, and he understood that sometimes neighbors needed to watch out for each other. Of course, Ruth, anything in particular I should watch for? Just anyone who doesn't belong here. Derek and Emma are under a restraining order, but they might try to send someone else. You having trouble with that son-in-law of yours? You could say that. Well, don't you worry. Anyone comes around here causing problems, they'll have to deal with me first. Tom Bradley was 73 years old and built like a scarecrow, but he'd been a Marine in Vietnam and still kept his service pistol in his truck. I felt better knowing he was watching. The next morning I was proven right to be cautious. I woke up to find that someone had cut the lock on my equipment barn and left the door open. Nothing appeared to be missing, but someone had clearly been inside during the night. I called the sheriff's department, and Deputy Martinez came out to investigate. Miss Davis, it looks like someone was searching for something specific. They went through your files but didn't take any of the equipment. What kind of files? Looks like paperwork related to your farm operations, insurance documents, equipment titles, that sort of thing. I felt Derek was looking for something he could use against me, probably documents that would support his claims about the farm's financial condition or my mental competence. Deputy Martinez, my son-in-law is under investigation for embezzlement and fraud. I think he's looking for evidence he can use to discredit me. Did he find anything? I don't think so. All my important documents are in my house or at the bank, but as I walked through the barn after the deputy left, I realized Derek might have been looking for something else entirely, something that would give him leverage over me or provide him with another angle to pursue. That afternoon, Emma called again, and this time she sounded different, scared. Mom, Derek's talking about doing something drastic. He says if he's going to prison anyway, he might as well make sure you can't keep the farm. What does that mean? I don't know. He won't tell me, but he's been making phone calls and meeting with people I don't recognize. Mom, I'm starting to think you're right about him. Starting to think, okay, I know you're right about him, but I don't know how to get away from him. We don't have any money, and now that you've frozen the accounts, we can't even afford a hotel room much longer. Emma, if you want help you need to tell me everything Derek has done and everything he's planning to do. I can't. He's my husband. He's a criminal. I know, but nothing. You have a choice to make, Emma. You can continue protecting a man who lied to you and used you to steal from your own mother, or you can do the right thing and help me stop him. If I help you, he'll divorce me. If you don't help me, I'll disown you. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. Emma needed to understand that there were consequences for her choices. You'd really disown me. You've already disowned me by choosing Derek over the truth. I'm just making it official. Emma was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, he's been talking to someone about challenging your mental competence in court. He thinks, if he can get you declared incompetent, he can still get control of the farm. On what grounds? He's been documenting everything you do, taking pictures of you working in the barn, recording phone conversations when possible. He's trying to build a case that you're too old to safely operate farm equipment. I felt my anger spike. He's been spying on me. Yes, and Mom, there's something else. He's been talking to people about having you committed for psychological evaluation. He thinks if he can get you hospitalized, even temporarily, it will support his incompetence claim. How would he do that? I don't know the details, but he's been researching involuntary commitment procedure. Something about convincing a judge that you're a danger to yourself or others. The pieces were falling into place. The break-in at my barn hadn't been random. Derek had been looking for evidence of unsafe practices, equipment violations, anything he could use to suggest I was operating dangerously. Emma, I need you to do something for me. What? I need you to record Derek talking about these plans. I need proof of what he's trying to do. I can't spy on my husband. Your husband is planning to have me falsely committed to a psychiatric facility so he can steal my farm. If you won't help me stop him, then you're as guilty as he is. Another long pause. I'll think about it, Emma finally said. Don't think too long. If Derek succeeds in having me committed, you'll never see me again, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you helped a thief destroy your own mother. That night, I sat in my kitchen, making plans of my own. Derek wanted to play games, fine, but he was about to learn that I'd been playing this game longer than he'd been alive. I called James Morrison at home. James, I need you to arrange something for me. I want a comprehensive psychological evaluation by the most respected psychiatrist you can find. I want it done immediately, and I want the results documented, so thoroughly, that no one can ever question my mental competence. That's a good idea, Ruth. It will preempt any claims Derek might make. I also want you to hire a private investigator. I want Derek followed 24 hours a day. I want to know who he talks to, where he goes, and what he's planning. That's expensive. I don't care. Derek thinks he's playing chess, but he's about to find out he's been playing checkers with a chess master. The psychological evaluation took place 2 days later. Elizabeth Hartman was one of the most respected geriatric psychiatrists in the state, and she put me through 4 hours of comprehensive testing. Mrs. Davis, she said when we finished, I want to be very clear about my finding. You show no signs of cognitive decline, mental illness, or incompetence of any kind. Your memory is excellent, your reasoning skills are sharp, and your judgment appears sound. Anyone who suggests otherwise is either mistaken or lying. Can you put that in writing? I'll have a detailed report ready by tomorrow.
And Mrs. Davis, if anyone tries to use your age against you in court, I'll be happy to testify on your behalf. The private investigator James hired was a former police detective named Sarah Coleman. She started following Derek immediately, and her first report made my blood run cold. Derek had been meeting with a man named Vincent Torres, who ran what Sarah described as a consulting firm that specialized in elder care advocacy. But when Sarah dug deeper, she discovered that Torres had been investigated multiple times for insurance fraud and had connections to several nursing homes that had been cited for patient abuse. Mrs. Davis, Sarah told me during our first meeting, I think Derek is planning to have you declared incompetent and then placed in one of Torres's affiliated facilities. Once you're committed, Derek would have a much easier time gaining control of your assets. Can he really do that? If he can convince a judge that you're a danger to yourself, yes. The process is designed to protect vulnerable adults, but it can be abused by people who know how to work the system. What kind of evidence would he need? Documented incidents of unsafe behavior, testimony from people who claim to be concerned about your welfare, medical evidence of declining health. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to be convincing. I thought about the break-in at my barn, the meetings with unknown people, Emma's warnings about Derek documenting my activities. He's been building a case against me, it looks that way, but Mrs. Davis, the fact that you're aware of what he's doing gives us a significant advantage. We can prepare a defense, and we can also gather evidence of his fraudulent intentions. What do you need me to do? Keep doing exactly what you've been doing. Run your farm, live your life, document everything. The more normal and competent you appear, the harder it will be for Derek to convince anyone otherwise. And what will you do? I'm going to find out exactly what Derek and Torres are planning, and then we're going to stop them. Over the next week, Sarah's surveillance revealed the full scope of Derek's plan. He'd been meeting regularly with Torres and 2 other men who worked for a company that provided intervention services for families dealing with elderly relatives who refused help. The plan was elegant and vicious. Derek would file for emergency guardianship, claiming I was suffering from dementia and posed a danger to myself and others. As evidence, he would present documentation of unsafe farming practices, testimony from concerned neighbors who were actually Torres's associates, and medical records that had been carefully misinterpreted to suggest cognitive decline. Once I was declared incompetent, Derek would have me committed to a facility owned by one of Torres's partners. The farm would be sold to pay for my care, with Derek taking a substantial commission as my guardian. I would disappear into the system, drugged and isolated, while Derek walked away with millions. It was a plan that had apparently worked before. Sarah's investigation revealed that Torres had been involved in similar schemes targeting elderly property owners across 3 states. Miss Davis, Sarah told me, this is bigger than just Derek stealing your farm. This is an organized operation that targets vulnerable seniors. I'm not vulnerable, no you're not, but Derek has been positioning you to appear vulnerable. The break-in at your barn, the financial manipulations, even his attempts to isolate you from Emma. It's all been designed to create a paper trail that supports an incompetence claim. So what do? We turn the tables. Instead of waiting for Derek to make his move, we make ours first. Sarah's plan was simple but effective. We would let Derek proceed with his scheme just far enough to gather evidence of conspiracy and fraud, then we would spring our trap. The first step was to let Derek think his plan was working. I started making small mistakes around the farm, Nothing dangerous, but enough to make it appear that I might be having minor difficulties. I left a gate open one day, forgot to turn off a water spigot another day, and made sure Derek's surveillance would document these incidents. Meanwhile, Sarah was documenting every meeting Derek had with Torres and his associates. She photographed them together, recorded their conversations when possible, and tracked their financial transactions. The breakthrough came when Sarah managed to get close enough to Torres's office to plant a listening device. The conversation she recorded was everything we needed. "Derek, you need to move faster," Torres was saying. "The longer this drags out, the more chance she has to figure out what's happening." "I'm building a solid case," Derek replied. "I've got documented incidents, financial records showing she can't manage money, and I'm working on getting medical testimony." "What about the daughter?" "Emma's on board. She's scared of her mother's deteriorating condition and wants what's best for her." "Good. Once we get the guardianship, how quickly can we move on the property?" "The developers are ready to close as soon as I have legal authority. We're talking about a 3-week timeline from commitment to sale, and the old woman will be safely tucked away where she can't cause any more trouble." They were talking about me like I was already dead, like I was just an obstacle to be removed rather than a human being with rights and dignity. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was hopeless, and they'd underestimated my determination to protect myself and my farm. The next morning, I called James Morris. "James, it's time to act. I want Derek arrested for conspiracy to commit fraud, and I want Vincent Torres and his associates arrested as accessories. Do we have enough evidence? We have recordings of them planning to falsely commit me and steal my farm. If that's not enough, I don't know what is. I'll contact the district attorney's office immediately. And James, I want this to be very public. I want everyone to know what Derek tried to do. Are you sure about that? It will be embarrassing for Emma." Emma chose her side. Now she can live with the consequences. The arrests happened simultaneously. Derek was taken into custody at the motel where he and Emma were staying. Torres and his associates were arrested at their office downtown. The charges included conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and attempted theft of property. Emma called me an hour later, hysterical. "Mom, they arrested Derek. They're saying he tried to have you committed." "That can't be true." "It's absolutely true. Derek was planning to have me falsely declared incompetent so he could steal my farm and have me locked away in a nursing home. But he loves me. He wouldn't do something like that." "Derek loves money. Emma, you were just a convenient way to get access to mine." "I don't believe you." "Then you're even more naive than I thought." I hung up and sat in my kitchen, feeling oddly calm. The immediate threat was over. Derek was in jail. His conspiracy had been exposed, and my farm was safe. But the real test was still to come. Derek would eventually be released on bail, and he would undoubtedly try one last desperate gambit to save himself. I needed to be ready for whatever came next. That evening, Angela Hartwell called me. "Mrs. Davis, I just heard about Derek's arrest. On behalf of Hartwell Properties, I want to apologize for our involvement in this situation. Your involvement was voluntary. No one forced you to deal with a man who had no authority to sell my property. You're right, and we accept responsibility for our poor due diligence. However, I'm calling to let you know that we're withdrawing our development plans for this area entirely." I was surprised. "Why?" "Frankly, this has become a public relations nightmare. Our company name is now associated with an elder abuse scandal. We're cutting our losses and moving on." "Good. Mrs. Davis, I want you to know that Derek Morrison cost our company over $200,000. We'll be pursuing him for damages in addition to the criminal charges he's facing. I hope you bankrupt him. We intend to try." After Angela hung up, I realized that Derek's situation had become even more desperate. He wasn't just facing criminal charges for what he'd done to me, he was also facing massive civil liability to Hartwell Properties, and potentially other victims of his scheme. A man with nothing left to lose could be very dangerous indeed. Derek made bail 3 days later, courtesy of a bondsman who specialized in what he euphemistically called family disputes. I learned this from Sarah Coleman, who had resumed surveillance the moment Derek walked out of jail. What she told me made my blood run cold. "Ruth, he's not behaving like someone who's been caught. He's behaving like someone who's planning something bigger. I was sitting in my kitchen, watching the sunrise paint the eastern sky in shades of gold and pink. Another sleepless night, but the coffee was strong and my resolve was stronger. What do you mean? Most people in Derek's situation would be meeting with lawyers, trying to cut deals, maybe planning to flee. Derek's doing none of that. Instead, he's been visiting hardware stores, rental equipment companies, and having long conversations with people I can't identify. People like Vincent Torres? No, Torres is still in jail. These are new players, rough-looking men who don't seem like the consulting type. I felt a familiar chill of fear, the same feeling I'd had when I first discovered Derek's betrayal, but this time the fear was mixed with anger. How dare he continue to threaten me after everything he'd already done? Sarah, I want you to find out who these men are and what Derek's paying them for. Already working on it. But Ruth, I think you should consider staying somewhere else for a few days, just until we know what Derek's planning. I'm not leaving my farm. I understand your attachment to this place, but no, you don't understand. I stood up and walked to the window that faced the eastern pasture, where my horses were grazing in the morning light. This farm isn't just my home or my business. It's my identity. It's 4 generations of my family's blood, sweat, and dreams. If I run away now, I'll be proving Derek was right about me being too weak to protect what's mine. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then we'll make sure you're protected. How? Leave that to me. That afternoon, I had an unexpected visitor. Emma appeared at my front door looking haggard and desperate. She'd lost weight. Her clothes were wrinkled and her eyes were red from crying. Mom, please, I need to talk to you. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the edge of my couch like she was ready to bolt at any moment. Derek's lost his mind, she said without preamble. Ever since he got out of jail, he's been talking about making you pay for ruining his life. He says if he's going to prison anyway, he might as well finish what he started. What does that mean? I don't know exactly, but he's been meeting with scary people. Men who look like they've been in prison themselves. And Mom, he's been drinking. A lot. He's not thinking clearly. I studied my daughter's face, looking for signs of deception, but all I saw was genuine fear. Emma, if you're really concerned about Derek's behavior, why are you still with him? Where would I go? I don't have any money. No job. No friends who aren't his friends. And Mom, I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant. 8 weeks. I found out the day after Derek was arrested. Tears started flowing down her cheeks. I don't know what to do. Derek doesn't even know yet. With everything that's happened, I haven't found the right time to tell him. I felt my maternal instincts warring with my anger and hurt. This was my grandchild. Emma was carrying an innocent life that didn't deserve to be caught up in Derek's schemes. Emma, if you're really afraid of Derek, you can stay here. I can't. He'd never forgive me. Derek's forgiveness should be the least of your concerns right now. You don't understand. I love him. Even after everything, I still love him. You love the man you thought he was. The real Derek is a criminal who was planning to have me falsely committed to steal my farm. Maybe there's an explanation. Stop. I held up my hand. Emma, I'm going to say this once, and I want you to listen carefully. Derek Morrison is dangerous. He's desperate. He's angry. And he's facing decades in prison. Desperate men do desperate things. If you stay with him, you're putting yourself and your baby at risk. He wouldn't hurt me. 6 months ago, you would have said he'd never steal from me either. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Mom, what if I could convince him to confess, to plead guilty and take whatever plea deal they offer him? Would you consider dropping the charges? No. Please, think about your grandchild. I am thinking about my grandchild. That baby deserves better than a father who's a thief and a con man, and you deserve better than a husband who would use you to steal from your own mother. Emma stood up abruptly. Fine, I tried to reason with you, but you're too stubborn and vindictive to see past your own anger. I'm vindictive. Emma, your husband tried to have me locked in a mental institution so he could steal everything I've worked for my entire life. If wanting justice for that makes me vindictive, then I'll wear that label proudly. You're going to destroy our family. Derek destroyed our family the moment he decided I was worth more to him dead than alive. Emma stormed out,
slamming the door hard enough to rattle the window. I watched her drive away and wondered if I'd ever see her again, or if I'd want to. That evening, Sarah called with disturbing news. "Ruth, I've identified the men Derek's been meeting with. They're not consultants or advisors, they're criminals. Specifically, they're known associates of a man named Marcus Webb, who runs an arson-for-hire operation." My mouth went dry. Arson, it's a common insurance fraud scheme. Someone torches a property, collects the insurance money, and disappears. But in Derek's case, I don't think he's planning to collect insurance. Then what's the point? If your farmhouse burned down with you in it, Derek would inherit as Emma's husband. Even with the criminal charges, he'd still be your next of kin through marriage. I felt the room spinning around me. He's planning to kill me, I think so, and he's planning to make it look like an accident. We have to call the police. With what evidence? Meeting with known criminals isn't illegal. Planning arson is, but we don't have recordings of those conversations. So what do? We catch him in the act. Sarah's plan was simple but terrifying. We would let Derek proceed with his arson plot while documenting everything, then catch him and his accomplices red-handed. "Ruth, I know this is asking a lot, but if we can catch Derek actually trying to burn down your house, we'll have enough evidence to put him away forever. What if something goes wrong? What if I don't get out in time? You won't be in the house. We'll set up a safe location where you can watch everything unfold. The moment Derek and his associates show up, we'll have law enforcement ready to move, and my house will stop them before they can actually start a fight." I thought about the farmhouse where I'd lived for 4 decades, where I'd raised Emma, where my parents had lived before me. The idea of risking it, even for justice, made me feel sick. There has to be another way. "Ruth, if we don't stop Derek now, he'll just try again. Maybe not arson next time, maybe something even worse. As long as he's free and desperate, you'll never be safe." I knew she was right, but the thought of deliberately putting myself in danger went against every survival instinct I had. "How long do we have to decide?" "Not long. My surveillance suggests Derek's planning to move within the next few days, probably this weekend when there are fewer people around to witness anything." I spent that night walking through every room of my farmhouse, touching surfaces and remembering moments. This was where I'd nursed Emma through chickenpox, where I'd celebrated Christmas mornings, where I'd mourned my parents' deaths. Every corner held memories, and the thought of Derek destroying all of it in pursuit of money made my rage burn white hot. By morning my decision was made. "Sarah, I'll do it, but I want every possible safeguard in place. Of course, I'll coordinate with the sheriff's department and the state police. We'll have the house surrounded, and we'll move the moment Derek's people show up." "What about Emma? What about her? If Derek goes to prison for attempted murder, she'll be alone with a baby and no money." "Ruth, that's not your responsibility anymore. The baby is my grandchild, and Derek is still the father. Some things can't be fixed." Friday evening Sarah called with the final detail. "It's happening tonight. Derek rented a van this afternoon, and he's been loading it with gasoline and accelerants. My contacts in the sheriff's department are in position, and we have a mobile command unit set up at Tom Bradley's farm." "What time?" "Probably around 2 in the morning. Most people are asleep by then, and it would give Derek time to establish an alibi." "Where will I be?" "In the command unit with me. You'll have a clear view of your house, and you'll be able to see everything that happened." I packed a small bag with essentials and important documents, just in case something went wrong. As I locked up the house that might not be standing in the morning, I whispered a small prayer to whatever powers might be listening. The command unit was actually a converted RV parked behind Tom's barn, about half a mile from my house, but with a clear line of sight. Sarah had set up multiple monitors showing feeds from hidden cameras she'd placed around my property. "Ruth, I want you to understand that once this starts, it's going to move very fast. Derek and his people will be professionals, and they'll want to get in and out quickly." "How many people are we expecting?" "Probably 3 or 4. Derek will likely stay back as a lookout while the others do the actual work. And the police, 20 officers in position around your property. The moment Derek's people break into your house, we move." We waited in tense silence, watching the monitors and listening to radio chatter from the officers positioned around my farm. At 1:47 a.m., Sarah suddenly leaned forward. "There, Dark van coming up your driveway with headlights off. I watched my own property on a monitor like it was a movie, except this movie could end with my life's work burning to the ground. The van stopped about 50 yards from my house, and 3 figures got out. I don't see Derek. He'll be in the van, maintaining radio contact with his crew. The 3 men moved toward my house with practiced efficiency. They were dressed in dark clothing and carried duffel bags that presumably contained their arson supplies. Sarah, they're at my front door. I see them. Sheriff's Department, this is Coleman. Suspects are approaching the target location. The radio crackled back. Copy that. All units, maintain position until subjects are inside. One of the men produced what looked like lock-picking tools and went to work on my front door. Within minutes, they were inside my house. Now, I asked. Not yet, we need to catch them actually starting the fire. Through the windows, I could see flashlight beams moving through my house. The men were working methodically, probably placing accelerants in strategic locations to ensure maximum damage. Sarah, this is taking too long. What if they actually light the fire before the police move? They won't, trust me. But even as she said it, I saw a flicker of flame through my kitchen window. They've started the fire. I grabbed Sarah's arm. All units, move now, Sarah shouted into her radio. Suspects have initiated arson. Move, move. Suddenly, my property was flooded with light. As police vehicles converged from multiple directions, spotlights illuminated the area like daylight, and I could hear officers shouting commands through megaphone. The 3 men inside my house came running out, but they were immediately surrounded by armed officers. 2 surrendered immediately, but the 3rd tried to run and was tackled in my front yard. What about Derek? I asked. Sarah pointed to another monitor showing the van. Still there. He hasn't moved. But even as she spoke, the van's engine started, and it began backing down my driveway. He's running. Sarah grabbed her radio. Suspect vehicle fleeing south on County Road 47. Dark van. License number. She rattled off the plate number she'd memorized earlier. In pursuit, came the radio response. Through my kitchen window I could see flames growing brighter. Sarah, my house is really burning. Fire department's already en route. They'll have it under control in minutes. She was right. Within 5 minutes, fire trucks arrived and began dousing the flames. The damage was confined to my kitchen and part of the living room. Significant, but not devastating. The radio crackled again. Command, this is Unit 7. We have the van stopped about 2 miles south of the target location. Driver in custody. Derek, I asked. Has to be. Ruth, we got them all. I slumped back in my chair, adrenaline leaving my system, and exhaustion taking its place. It was over. Derek's final gambit had failed, and this time there would be no bail, no plea deals, no second chances. Sarah, I want to see my house. The fire department hasn't cleared it yet. I don't care. I need to see what Derek tried to destroy. 20 minutes later, I was standing in what remained of my kitchen, surrounded by the smell of smoke and melted plastic. The damage was extensive but not total. The structure was sound, and most of my house was untouched. Sheriff Tom Martinez found me standing in my living room, surveying the water damage from the fire hoses. Mrs. Davis, I'm sorry about the mess, but it could have been much worse. I know. Thank you for acting so quickly, ma'am. Derek Morrison and his 3 accomplices are in custody. They're looking at charges of attempted arson, attempted murder, conspiracy, and about a dozen other felonies. With their prior records, they're going away for a very long time. What about Em? She wasn't involved in tonight's activities, but Mrs. Davis, she's been staying at the motel with Derek. When we arrested him, she was there. My heart sank.
Despite everything, I'd hoped Emma would have the sense to distance herself from Derek before he destroyed himself completely. Is she under arrest too? No, but she's pretty upset. She's asking to see you. I thought about my daughter, pregnant and alone, probably scared out of her mind. Despite everything she'd done, despite all the betrayal and manipulation, she was still my child. Where is she now? At the police station. She's not in custody, but she has nowhere else to go. I looked around my damaged house, at the life Derek had tried to destroy, and made a decision that surprised even me. Bring her here. Mrs. Davis, are you sure? After everything, she's carrying my grandchild. And right now, That baby is all that matters. Emma arrived an hour later, escorted by a female deputy. She looked broken, hollow-eyed and shaking. When she saw the damage to the house, she burst into tears. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Derek was planning this. I thought he was just meeting with lawyers." "Emma, your husband tried to burn down my house with me in it. This goes beyond anything we've been through before. I know, and I can't defend him anymore. But Mom, I'm scared. I'm pregnant. I have no money, and now Derek's going to prison. I don't know what to do." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw past the betrayal to the frightened young woman who needed help. She'd made terrible choices, but she was still my blood. "Emma, I'm going to offer you something, but there are conditions. Anything. You can stay here while you get back on your feet. I'll help you through the pregnancy, and with the baby. But you have to testify against Derek. You have to tell the truth about everything he did, everything he planned, and you have to cut all contact with him permanently." "Mom, he's my husband. He's a criminal who tried to murder me. If you choose him over justice, then you're choosing him over your child's future." Emma was quiet for a long time, staring at the charred remains of my kitchen. Finally, she said, "I'll testify. I'll tell them everything I know. And Derek, I'll file for divorce as soon as possible. Then you can stay." The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings, insurance adjusters and construction workers. Derek and his accomplices were denied bail and held pending trial. The charges against them were extensive, and the evidence was overwhelming. Emma kept her word. She testified before the grand jury about Derek's financial manipulations, his plans to steal the farm, and his conversations about neutralizing me as an obstacle. Her testimony, combined with Sarah's surveillance evidence and the physical evidence from the arson attempt, made Derek's conviction inevitable. The trial took place 6 months later. Derek's attorney tried to claim that his client had been driven to desperation by my vindictive pursuit of criminal charges for what he characterized as a family disagreement. But the evidence was too strong, and Derek's own recorded conversations with Vincent Torres and the arson conspirators made his intentions clear. Derek Morrison was sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder, arson, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Vincent Torres and his associates received similar sentences. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, made it clear that she viewed their crimes as particularly heinous. "Mr. Morrison," she said during sentencing, "you attempted to steal not just money or property, but an entire life. You tried to rob Mrs. Davis of her autonomy, her dignity, and ultimately her life itself. This court finds your actions reprehensible and deserving of the maximum sentence allowed by law." Derek showed no remorse, even at the end. As he was led away in shackles, he looked directly at me and mouthed the words, "This isn't over," but it was over. Derek would be eligible for parole when he was 68 years old, assuming he lived that long in prison. His dreams of wealth and status had died in my kitchen the night he tried to burn down my house. Emma gave birth to a daughter that spring, a beautiful baby girl she named Grace. Holding my granddaughter for the first time, I felt a complex mix of emotion: joy at this new life, sadness for the circumstances of her birth, and determination to ensure she grew up, knowing the difference between right and wrong. "Mom," Emma said as we sat in my rebuilt kitchen, Grace sleeping in her arms, "I know I can never undo what I did. I know I can never take back the things I said or the choices I made." "No, you can't. But I want to try to make up for it. I want to be the daughter you raised me to be." "That's going to take time, Emma. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal quickly." "I know. But I have time. And I have." She looked down at Grace. "I want her to know her grandmother. I want her to grow up on this farm the way I did." "We'll see." Emma had been working part-time at the local feed store while living with me, saving money, and slowly rebuilding her life. She was a good mother to Grace, attentive and loving in ways that reminded me of the little girl I'd raised, but I still watched her carefully, looking for signs of the entitlement and manipulation that had made Derek's scheme possible. Trust would have to be earned back incrementally, through consistent actions over time. The farm itself had recovered from Derek's assault, the insurance money had paid for extensive renovations, and in some ways, the house was better than before. I'd modernized the kitchen, updated the electrical system, and installed a state-of-the-art security system. I'd also made some legal changes. The farm was now held in an irrevocable trust that could never be transferred without the approval of 3 independent trustees. Even if something happened to me, no one person would ever again have the power to steal my family's legacy. Angela Hartwell had kept her word about withdrawing Hartwell properties from the area. Other developers had sniffed around, but word of Derek's scheme and the legal protections I'd put in place had discouraged most of them. My farm would remain a farm for as long as I lived, and hopefully for generations beyond. One evening, about a year after Derek's conviction, I was sitting on my front porch watching Grace take her first tentative steps across the yard. Emma was nearby, encouraging her daughter with gentle words and patient smile. "Mom," Emma said, joining me on the porch steps, "do you think you'll ever really forgive me?" I thought about the question for a long time. Forgiveness was complicated, especially when the betrayal had cut so deep. "I'm working on it," I said. Finally, some days are easier than others. "I understand. I just hope that someday, when Grace is old enough to understand, you'll be able to tell her that her mother learned from her mistakes." "Emma, your mistakes nearly cost me everything. They nearly cost Grace her grandmother. That's not something that can be forgotten, even if it can eventually be forgiven." "I know, but I'm trying to be better. Every day I'm trying to be the person you raised me to be." "Then keep trying. That's all any of us can do." As the sun set over the fields that had sustained my family for 4 generations, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in over a year. Derek was gone. The farm was secure, and my granddaughter was healthy and happy. It wasn't the life I'd planned or expected, but it was a good life. And after everything Derek had tried to take from me, I was grateful for every moment of it. The phone rang inside the house, interrupting my thoughts. Emma got up to answer it, and I could hear her voice through the screen door. "Mom, it's for you. Someone from the state attorney general's office." I went inside, wondering what new legal matter might need my attention. The voice on the other end was professional but excited. "Mrs. Davis, this is Assistant Attorney General Rebecca Martinez. I'm calling to inform you that your case has been selected as the foundation for a new task force investigating elder abuse schemes across the region." "I'm sorry. What does that mean?" "It means that Derek Morrison's operation was just the tip of the iceberg. We've identified at least 12 other cases where similar schemes were used to defraud elderly property owners. Your willingness to fight back and gather evidence has given us the tools we need to prosecute an entire network of criminals." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, processing this information. "How many other people has Derek hurt?" "We're still investigating, but we believe he and his associates may have stolen millions of dollars from vulnerable seniors over the past 5 years. Without your case, we never would have been able to connect all the dots." "What happens now?" "We'll need your continued cooperation as we build cases against the other perpetrators. But Mrs. Davis, I want you to know that your courage in standing up to these criminals has probably saved dozens of other families from similar victimization." After I hung up, I sat quietly in my kitchen, thinking about all the other families who might have suffered what I'd gone through. Elderly parents manipulated by their own children, life savings stolen, properties seized through fraud and deception. Derek had been evil, but he hadn't been unique. There were others out there, preying on the vulnerable and exploiting family relationships for profit. But there were also people willing to fight back. People like me, like Sarah Coleman, like the prosecutors who were building cases against the criminals. Evil might be persistent, but justice could be persistent too. Emma came back inside, carrying Grace, who was getting fussy as bedtime approached. "What was that about?" Emma asked. "It was about making sure what happened to us doesn't happen to other families. You're going to help with more prosecutions, as many as it takes." Emma nodded, understanding the weight of what that meant. "I'm proud of you, Mom, for fighting back, for not letting Derek win." "I didn't fight back for pride, Emma. I fought back because this farm represents 4 generations of honest work and sacrifice. I couldn't let a con man steal that legacy, and now other families might keep their legacies too. Because of what you did. I looked at Grace, already half asleep in her mother's arms. Someday this little girl would inherit the farm that Derek had tried to steal. She would grow up knowing that her grandmother had fought to protect not just her own property, but other families as well. It was a legacy I could be proud of, a legacy built not on wealth or status, but on courage and principle. Derek had tried to destroy everything my family had built, but in the end, his evil had only made our legacy stronger. As I locked up the house that night, I felt truly secure for the first time in over a year. The physical security system would protect me from external threats, but more importantly, I had learned to trust my own instincts and stand up for myself. Derek Morrison had taught me something valuable, though he'd never intended to. He'd taught me that family loyalty had to be earned, not assumed. He'd taught me that trust should be based on actions, not words. And he'd taught me that sometimes, the people closest to you are the ones you need to be most careful about. They were hard lessons, but necessary ones. And now that I'd learned them, no one would ever again be able to manipulate me the way Derek had tried to do. My farm was safe, my granddaughter was healthy, and justice had been served. It wasn't everything I'd once hoped for, but it was enough, more than enough. It was a life worth fighting for, and I'd proven that I was strong enough to do exactly that. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September, nearly 2 years after Derek's conviction. I was feeding the chickens when Emma brought it out to me, her face pale and troubled. "Mom, this came certified mail. It's from Derek's attorney." I wiped my hands on my work apron and took the envelope, noting the return address from a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a single page of legal letterhead, with a message that made my stomach drop. "Miss Davis, I am writing to inform you that my client, Derek Morrison, died by suicide in his cell at Millfield Correctional Facility on September 18. As per his final wishes, he has left a confession detailing additional crimes and victims that may be of interest to ongoing investigation. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to discuss the implications of this development." I read the letter twice before the words fully registered. Derek was dead. The man who had tried to steal my farm, my life and my dignity had taken his own life in prison. "What does it say?" Emma asked quietly. I handed her the letter and watched her face crumble as she read it. Whatever complex feelings she still harbored for her ex-husband, the finality of death hit her hard. "I need to call James Morrison," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Mom, are you okay?" The question surprised me. Was I okay? Derek had tried to destroy everything I valued, had manipulated my own daughter into betraying me, had literally tried to murder me. His death should have felt like closure, like justice finally served. Instead, I felt hollow, empty in a way I hadn't expected. "I don't know," I admitted. "I think I need some time to process this." James Morrison arrived at the farm that afternoon, along with Assistant Attorney General Rebecca Martinez, who had been overseeing the Elder Abuse Task Force. We sat in my living room while Grace played quietly with her toys in the corner, and Emma busied herself making coffee. "Ruth," Rebecca began, "Derek's confession is extensive. 27 pages detailing schemes involving 43 elderly victims across 6 states. The dollar amounts we're talking about exceed $12 million. I felt sick. $12 million stolen from how many families? 43 that we know of. But Derek's confession suggests there may be others we haven't identified yet. James leaned forward in his chair. "Ruth, this confession is going to break open the biggest elder abuse case in state history." Derek documented names, dates, bank account numbers, co-conspirators. He kept meticulous records. Why would he confess now? Why not during his trial? Rebecca and James exchanged glances. According to his attorney, Derek was facing retaliation from other inmates. Apparently, some of his victims had family members in the prison system. His life was in constant danger, so he killed himself rather than face the consequences of what he'd done. It appears that way. But Ruth, His confession also clears up some mysteries about your own case, things we never fully understood, such as, Rebecca pulled out a folder thick with documents. Derek admits that he targeted you specifically because of your farm's location and value. He spent months researching your family, your financial situation, even Emma's psychological profile to determine how best to manipulate both of you. The clinical nature of it made me feel sick. Derek hadn't stumbled into a scheme to steal my farm. He'd methodically planned it like a military operation. There's more, James added gently. Derek confesses that he married Emma specifically to gain access to you and your property. He admits that he never loved her, that the entire relationship was part of his plan. I looked over at Emma, who had gone very still by the coffee maker. She'd heard every word, and the pain on her face was devastating. Emma, I said softly, but she held up a hand to stop me. I'm fine, Mom. I mean, I'm not fine, but I don't need sympathy right now. I need to understand what this means for all the other families he hurt. Rebecca nodded approvingly. That's actually why we're here. Derek's confession gives us enough evidence to pursue the other co-conspirators and recover assets for victims. But we need your help. What kind of help? We want you to become the lead victim advocate for the task force. Your experience, your willingness to fight back, and your credibility with law enforcement make you the ideal person to help other victims navigate the legal system. I was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the implications. That would mean testifying in dozens of cases, reliving Derek's scheme over and over again. Yes, it would also mean traveling to other states, working with other prosecutors, and probably facing media attention. It's not a small commitment, but it would help other families get justice and get their money back. Derek's confession includes details about hidden assets, offshore accounts, and property purchases made with stolen funds. We're talking about returning millions of dollars to victims who thought they'd never see their money again. Emma surprised me by speaking up. Mom, you should do it. Emma, no. Listen, Derek destroyed our family because we let him, because I was too naive and you were too trusting. But he destroyed 42 other families too, and some of them might not be as strong as you are. They need someone to fight for them. I looked at my daughter, seeing a maturity in her that hadn't been there before. Derek's conviction. Becoming a mother had changed her, but so had learning the full extent of her ex-husband's deception. It would mean leaving you and Grace for extended periods. Grace and I will be fine. And Mom, maybe this is how we honor the people Derek hurt. Maybe this is how we make sure his evil actually accomplishes some good. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Phoenix, Arizona, carrying a briefcase full of legal documents and a heart full of righteous anger. My first case was Martha Kleinfeld, an 81-year-old widow, whose son-in-law had used tactics remarkably similar to Derek's to steal her house and life savings. Martha's daughter, Patricia, met me at the airport. She was about Emma's age, with tired eyes, and the defeated posture of someone who'd been fighting a losing battle. Mrs. Davis, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you're here. The local police have been treating this like a family dispute, instead of a crime. Tell me everything, I said, as we drove toward Martha's nursing home. The story was heartbreakingly familiar. Patricia's husband, David Chen, had convinced Martha that she was becoming forgetful and needed help managing her finances. He'd gradually taken control of her accounts, sold her house without her knowledge, and had her committed to a care facility when she tried to resist. The worst part, Patricia said, is that David convinced me it was for the best. He showed me financial records that made it look like Mom was making dangerous mistakes with money. I actually helped him get guardianship. Did you ever talk to your mother directly about her concerns? David said it would only upset her more. He said she was in denial about her condition. Patricia's voice broke. I trusted my husband over my own mother, just like Derek's confession says he planned all along. Martha Kleinfeld was sharp as a tack despite her 81 years. She sat in her wheelchair by the nursing home window, eyes blazing with intelligence and fury. Mrs. Davis, they told me, you stopped a man from stealing your farm. I had help, Mrs. Kleinfeld, good attorneys, good investigators, and eventually some luck. Call me Martha,
And tell me the truth. Can we get my house back? I pulled out Derek's confession and pointed to a specific paragraph. According to this document, your son-in-law, David, was working directly with Derek Morrison. Derek taught him the exact methods he used against me. David bought your house using a shell company, then sold it to a development firm for 3 times what he paid you. Can we prove that? Derek documented everything. Bank transfers, shell company registrations, even recorded phone conversations, where David admits to falsifying your mental health evaluations. Martha's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of rage. That bastard stole my grandmother's china, my husband's war medals, 50 years of family photos. He cleaned out everything and told Patricia I donated it all to charity because I was confused. We're going to get it back, Martha, all of it. The Phoenix case took 3 months to resolve, but it was worth every day. David Chen was arrested for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. The shell company he'd used to buy Martha's house was dissolved, and the property was returned to her. More importantly, we recovered nearly $400,000 in stolen assets. Martha moved back into her house on a crisp December morning, with Patricia by her side. The 2 women had reconciled during the legal process, both recognizing how David had manipulated their relationship. Mrs. Davis, Martha said, as we stood in her kitchen, I want you to know that what you did for me goes beyond getting my house back. You gave me my dignity again. You proved I wasn't crazy or incompetent. You never were, Martha. David just wanted people to think you. Are you going to help other families too? As many as I can. From Phoenix, I traveled to Denver, then to Atlanta, then to Portland. Each case had its own unique details, but the pattern was always the same. A trusted family member or caregiver gradually assumed control over an elderly person's finances, isolated them from support systems, and then systematically stole everything of value. Some victims had been left homeless, others had been committed to substandard care facilities, where they were medicated into compliance. A few had died before we could help them, their life savings already transferred to offshore accounts. But Derek's confession gave us the roadmap to recover stolen assets and prosecute the perpetrators. More importantly, it gave us credibility with law enforcement agencies that had previously dismissed these cases as family dispute. By the following spring, our task force had recovered over $8 million for victims and secured convictions against 23 criminals. The media attention was intense, with news outlets calling it the largest elder abuse prosecution in American history. I found myself giving interviews on national television, speaking at conferences about elder abuse prevention, and consulting with legislators about strengthening protection laws. It wasn't a role I'd ever imagined for myself, but it felt like important work. The personal cost was significant. I was away from home 2 weeks out of every month, living out of hotel rooms, and eating restaurant food. I missed watching Grace take her first real steps, missed her first words, missed the daily routines that had grounded me for decades. But Emma was right, that Grace and she would be fine. Emma had matured into a responsible single mother, working full-time at the feed store and taking business classes at the community college. She managed the farm's day-to-day operations during my absences, proving that she'd inherited more of my practical sense than I'd realized. Mom, she said during one of my brief returns home, I've been thinking about something. What's that? I want to go to law school. I looked up from the financial reports I was reviewing. Law school? I want to help families like ours. I understand how these scams work from the inside, how easy it is to be manipulated when you trust someone. I think I could be good at prosecuting these cases. Law school is expensive, Emma. I know, but I've been saving money, and there are scholarships for single mothers. Plus, I've already talked to Rebecca Martinez about internship opportunities with the task force. I studied my daughter's face, seeing determination I hadn't witnessed since she was a child. What about Grace? Mom would watch her when you're traveling, and we'd figure out childcare when you're both home. It wouldn't be easy, but it's important. You've really thought this through. Derek stole 3 years of my life, Mom, he made me complicit in hurting you and other family. I can't undo that, but maybe I can spend the rest of my career making sure other people don't go through what we did. That conversation took place on a Wednesday evening in May. By Friday, Emma had submitted applications to 3 law schools with strong elder law programs. By August, she'd been accepted to all 3 with partial scholarships. While Emma prepared for law school, I continued traveling the country, building cases and helping victims recover their losses. The work was emotionally exhausting, but deeply satisfying. Each family we helped felt like a small victory against the kind of evil Derek had represented. The most challenging case came in October, when I was called to Milwaukee to help with a situation that hit uncomfortably close to home. An elderly farmer named Robert Hendricks had been swindled out of his 450-acre dairy farm by his nephew and business partner. The tactics were identical to Derek's plan for my farm, down to the forged documents and fake financial projection. Robert was 84 and had been farming his entire life. Unlike me, he hadn't caught the scheme in time. His nephew had successfully gained legal guardianship and sold the farm to developers. Robert was now living in a nursing home, his life's work bulldozed to make way for a shopping center. "Mrs. Davis," Robert said when I met him, "they tell me you saved your farm from thieves like my nephew. I had advantages you didn't have, Mr. Hendricks. Good legal help, family support and honestly some luck. Can you get my farm back?" I had to be honest with him. "The farm itself is probably gone. The developers have already started construction, but we might be able to recover compensation for what was stolen from you." Robert's eyes filled with tears. 40 years I milked cows on that land. 40 years of getting up at 4 in the morning, working through blizzards and heat waves. My nephew knew every story about that farm, every memory, and he sold it like it was just another piece of real estate. "I'm sorry, Robert. I know how that feels. Do you? Do you really?" I thought about my own farm, still intact thanks to my ability to fight back. Robert was right to question whether I truly understood his loss. "You're right. I don't know exactly how it feels, because I was able to save my farm, but I know how it feels to be betrayed by family. I know how it feels to have someone you trust treat your life's work like it's worthless." My nephew used to come to Sunday dinner every week, his whole family. I taught him to drive the tractor, helped him through college, and the whole time he was planning to steal everything. The Milwaukee case took 4 months to resolve. We couldn't restore Robert's farm, but we recovered $2 million in damages and sent his nephew to prison for 12 years. Robert used part of the money to establish a scholarship fund for agricultural students at the University of Wisconsin. "Mrs. Davis," he said at the scholarship fund announcement, "I can't get my farm back, but maybe I can help other young people learn to respect the land instead of just seeing it as a commodity." Flying home from Milwaukee, I found myself thinking about the broader implications of what we were accomplishing. Each case we won was justice for an individual family, but it was also a deterrent to future criminals. Word was spreading through the networks that prey on elderly victims that these crimes would be prosecuted aggressively and that victims had advocates willing to fight for them. Rebecca Martinez had compiled statistics showing that elder abuse reports were increasing nationwide, partly because victims were more willing to come forward and partly because law enforcement was taking the crimes more seriously.
"Ruth," she told me during a phone call from Milwaukee, "your work has fundamentally changed how these cases are handled. 5 years ago, most of these situations would have been dismissed as family disputes. Now we have dedicated prosecutors, specialized investigators, and victim advocates in 12 states." "It's not enough," I said. "We're still only catching a fraction of the criminals out there. But we're catching more every month. And more importantly, we're preventing crimes by making it clear that there are consequences." "What about the victims we can't help? The ones who don't have Derek's confession to guide us to evidence?" "We help who we can, Ruth, and we learn from every case to help prevent future victims." When I got home from Milwaukee, I found Emma deep in law school preparations, and Grace babbling happily in her high chair. At 18 months old, Grace was a bright, curious child who seemed to find wonder in everything around her. "How was Milwaukee?" Emma asked. "Difficult. We helped the victim recover money, but his farm was already destroyed." "I'm sorry," Emma, do you ever wonder if what we're doing is enough? We're fighting individual cases, but the system that allows these crimes to happen is still in place. Emma considered the question while feeding Grace mashed carrots. Mom, you always taught me that you can't control everything, but you can control how you respond to what happens to you. Derek happened to our family. These other criminals happen to other families. We can't prevent every crime, but we can make sure criminals face consequences, and victims get justice. When did you become so wise? When I watched my mother refuse to let a criminal destroy her life. That evening, I sat on my front porch watching the sun set over my field. The damage from Derek's arson attempt had been completely repaired, and the security improvements I'd made gave me confidence that my home was protected. Grace was asleep upstairs, and Emma was studying for her LSAT prep course. The farm was quiet except for the familiar sounds of animals settling in for the night. My phone rang, interrupting my peaceful moment. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Davis, this is Carol Brennan from Sacramento. I got your number from the Elder Abuse Task Force. I think my father is being swindled by his caregiver, and I don't know what to do. I listened as Carol described a situation that was becoming disturbingly familiar. An elderly widower, a trusted caregiver who'd gradually assumed control of his finances, suspicious bank transactions, and family members who'd been told the elderly person was confused and shouldn't be bothered with financial matters. Carol, have you contacted local law enforcement? They told me it sounds like a family dispute and that I should hire a lawyer. What about Adult Protective Services? They did a wellness check and said my father seemed fine physically, so there was nothing they could do about financial issues. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar frustration of a system that failed to protect its most vulnerable citizens. Carol, I'm going to give you the name of a prosecutor in Sacramento who specializes in these cases. I'm also going to send you a list of warning signs and documentation methods that will help build a case. Will you come help us? I looked through my kitchen window at Emma bent over her textbooks, at the crib visible in Grace's room, at the farm that represented 4 generations of my family's work. I'll do what I can from here, and if the local authorities need additional support, I'll consider traveling to Sacramento. After I hung up, I realized that Carol's call represented both the success and the limitations of what we'd accomplished. Word was spreading that help was available for elder abuse victims, which meant more people were reaching out, but the demand was overwhelming our resources, and we couldn't be everywhere at once. Emma appeared in the kitchen, still holding her LSAT prep book. New case. Sacramento. Sounds like the usual pattern. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think Derek would have stopped if he'd succeeded with our farm, or would he have just moved on to other victims? I thought about Derek's confession, about the methodical way he'd targeted dozens of families, about the clinical precision with which he'd destroyed lives. He would have kept going until someone stopped him. Then what we're doing isn't just about getting justice for past victims, it's about preventing future ones. That's the hope. Emma sat down across from me at the kitchen table. Mom, I've been thinking about my thesis topic for law school. You haven't even started law school yet. I know, but I want to focus on systemic reforms that could prevent elder abuse before it happens. Mandatory reporting requirements for financial institutions, standardized training for adult protective services, legal presumptions that protect elderly property owners from coercive transfers. Those are big changes. Derek taught me that individual criminals are just symptoms of larger problems. If we only focus on prosecuting criminals after they've already hurt people, we're always going to be playing defense. You want to change the laws themselves. I want to change the system that allows these crimes to happen in the first place. Looking at my daughter, I felt a surge of pride that surprised me. Emma had learned hard lessons from her marriage to Derek, but she'd channeled those lessons into something constructive. She wasn't just seeking redemption for her past mistakes, she was working to prevent other families from making similar ones. Emma, I think Derek's greatest failure was underestimating the women in this family. How so? He thought he could manipulate us because we were trusting and loving. He didn't realize that those same qualities would make us fierce protectors of other people. Emma smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. Derek created his own worst enemies. Yes, he did. That night, I lay in bed, thinking about the strange turns my life had taken. 2 years ago, I'd been a simple farmer, content to work my land and live quietly. Derek's betrayal had forced me to become something I'd never planned to be: an advocate, a prosecutor, a voice for victims who couldn't speak for themselves. It wasn't the life I'd chosen, but it was the life Derek's evil had made necessary, and surprisingly, it was a life I found meaningful in ways I hadn't expected. The phone rang again, this time showing Rebecca Martinez's number. "Ruth, I'm sorry to call so late, but I have news. The Department of Justice wants to create a national elder abuse task force, and they want you to head it up." I sat up in bed, fully awake now. National, federal jurisdiction, unlimited resources, the ability to pursue cases across state lines. Ruth, this would be the culmination of everything we've been working toward. What would it mean practically? It would mean moving to Washington, at least part-time. It would mean congressional testimony, policy development, international cooperation on cases involving overseas assets. It would be a huge commitment. I need to think about it. Of course, but Ruth, you should know that the offer is based entirely on what you've accomplished over the past 2 years. You've become the national face of elder abuse advocacy. After Rebecca hung up, I walked quietly through my house, looking at the life I'd built: the kitchen where I'd confronted Derek's lies, the living room where I'd planned my counterattack, the bedroom where I'd made the decision to fight back instead of surrendering. This house, this farm, this land had given me the strength to become someone I'd never imagined I could be, but maybe it was time to take that strength and use it on a larger stage. In Grace's room, I found my granddaughter sleeping peacefully, one small hand clutched around a stuffed horse. Emma had bought her. Grace would grow up in a world where elder abuse was taken seriously, where victims had advocates, where criminals faced real consequences. That was Derek's unintended legacy. In trying to destroy one family, he'd helped create a movement that would protect thousands of others. Emma appeared in the doorway, having heard me moving around. "Everything okay? The Department of Justice wants me to head a national elder abuse task force." Emma's eyes widened. "Mom, that's incredible. It would mean moving to Washington. Then you should do it. What about the farm? What about Grace?" "The farm will be here when you're ready to come back, and Grace needs to see her grandmother changing the world." I looked at my daughter, this woman who'd grown so much over the past 2 years, and realized she was right. Derek had tried to make me smaller, weaker, more dependent. The best revenge was to become larger, stronger, more independent than he'd ever imagined possible. "Emma, if I take this job, would you consider transferring to law school in Washington?" "Are you asking me to come with you?" "I'm asking if you want to help me build something bigger than either of us could create alone." Emma smiled, and in that smile I saw the future Derek had tried to steal from us. It was brighter than anything he could have imagined. 5 years later, I stood in the Hart Senate office building in Washington, D.C., preparing to testify before the Senate Committee on Aging about the elder protection. The marble hallways were intimidating, filled with sharp-suited lobbyists and career politicians, but I'd learned to navigate this world with the same determination I'd once used to navigate Derek's deception. Emma sat in the gallery behind me, now a practicing attorney with the Department of Justice's Elder Abuse Unit. Grace, nearly 7 years old, was spending the day with Emma's colleague, probably charming everyone in the office with her endless questions about how laws get made. "Miss Davis, are you ready?" Senator Patricia Coleman, the committee chair, asked, as I approached the witness table. "I'm ready, Senator." The hearing room was packed with journalists, advocates, and family members of elder abuse victims. Over the past 5 years, our task force had prosecuted over 200 cases, recovered nearly $50 million for victims, and fundamentally changed how law enforcement approached these crimes. "Miss Davis," Senator Coleman began, "you've become something of a legend in the fight against elder abuse. Can you tell us how this journey began?" I looked out at the faces in the gallery, seeing elderly victims, adult children who'd fought for their parents, prosecutors who'd worked tirelessly on these cases. They were all here because one evil man had tried to steal my farm and destroy my life. Senator, 5 years ago I was a simple farmer who trusted the wrong people. My son-in-law attempted to steal my family's farm through an elaborate scheme involving forgery, embezzlement, and eventually attempted murder. I fought back not because I was brave, but because I was angry. I was angry that someone could manipulate family relationships to commit crimes. I was angry that the system seemed designed to protect criminals rather than victims, and that anger led you to help other families. That anger led me to realize that my experience wasn't unique. Derek Morrison, my former son-in-law, was part of a network that had victimized dozens of elderly Americans. Once I understood the scope of the problem, I couldn't ignore it. Senator Robert Hayes, ranking minority member, leaned forward. Ms. Davis, critics of the Elder Protection Act argue that it creates too much federal oversight of family financial decisions. How do you respond to concerns about government overreach? I'd been expecting this question. Senator Hayes, respectful family financial planning doesn't require secrecy, forgery, or isolation of elderly family members from their support systems. The Elder Protection Act doesn't regulate legitimate family assistance. It creates consequences for criminal behavior that exploits trust and vulnerability. But how do we distinguish between legitimate concern for an aging parent and criminal exploitation? The same way we distinguish between legitimate business practices and fraud in any other context. Through evidence, investigation, and due process. The difference is that we're finally taking these crimes seriously instead of dismissing them as family disputes. Senator Maria Santos from California spoke next. Ms. Davis, can you share some statistics about what your task force has accomplished? I opened my folder and read from the summary report we'd prepared. Over the past 5 years, our task force has investigated 847 cases of suspected elder abuse. We've secured convictions in 312 cases, with an average sentence of 8 years in prison. We've recovered $47.3 million in stolen assets for victims. More importantly, we've seen a 340% increase in reporting of elder abuse crimes, suggesting that victims are more willing to come forward. What do you attribute the increase in reporting to? Victims and their families now believe they'll be taken seriously. 5 years ago, most elder abuse cases were dismissed by local law enforcement as civil matters. Today we have specialized prosecutors in 43 states who understand these crimes and know how to build effective cases. The questioning continued for 2 hours, covering everything from the technical aspects of financial fraud to the emotional impact on families. When it was over, I felt cautiously optimistic about the bill's chances of passage. Emma met me in the hallway afterward, practically glowing with pride. "Mom, you were incredible in there. When Senator Hayes tried to minimize the scope of the problem, you shut him down with facts and logic. Years of practice dealing with skeptical law enforcement. Speaking of which, I have news. The Peterson case in Nevada? We got convictions on all charges. The defendant got 15 years and we recovered the victim's entire retirement fund." The Peterson case had been particularly challenging because it involved a daughter who'd stolen from her own mother to fund a gambling addiction. The emotional complexity of prosecuting adult children for abusing their parents never got easier, but the alternative was letting criminals escape consequences. What about the mother? She's back in her own home with proper support services. And Emma, she specifically asked me to thank you for not giving up on her case. We walked through the Capitol building toward my office, past tourists taking pictures and school groups on field trips. Grace would be starting school trips like these soon, learning about government and civic responsibility in ways I'd never imagined when I was her age. "Mom, can I ask you something personal?" "Always. Do you ever regret leaving the farm?" I considered the question as we passed a group of high school students debating something with their teacher. I miss the daily rhythms of farm life. I miss watching the seasons change, working with animals, the satisfaction of growing things. But Emma, what we're doing here affects thousands of families. The farm was my legacy to you and Grace. This work is my legacy to people I'll never meet. What about when this is over? When we've passed all the laws and built all the systems we want to build? You mean retirement? I mean returning to what makes you happy. We'd reached my office, a modest space,
decorated with photos from cases we'd won and thank you letters from families we'd helped. On my desk was a framed picture of Grace riding a pony at the county fair, her face radiant with joy. Emma, I think happiness is more complicated than I used to believe. I was happy on the farm, but it was a simple happiness, built on routine and familiarity. This work is harder, more stressful, often heartbreaking, but it's also deeply meaningful, in ways that farming never was. So you don't want to go back. I want to know that when I do go back, it's because I've finished what Derek's crimes started, not because I'm running away from it. That evening, I attended a reception for elder abuse advocates from across the country. The hotel ballroom was filled with prosecutors, social workers, law enforcement officers, and victims' families. 5 years ago, most of these people had been working in isolation, fighting individual cases without much support or resources. Today, they were part of a coordinated national effort. Sarah Coleman, the private investigator who'd helped me catch Derek, found me by the hors d'oeuvres table. Ruth, I saw your testimony on C-SPAN, brilliant as always. Sarah, I didn't know you were in Washington. I'm consulting with the FBI on a multi-state case involving nursing home fraud. Turns out the techniques we used to catch Derek have applications for lots of different crimes. Any connection to our old friend Vincent Torres? Actually, yes. Torres has been running his operation from prison, using family members and associates on the outside. We're building a RICO case that should shut down his entire network. Even from prison, Vincent Torres was still trying to steal from elderly victims, but now we had the tools and experience to stop him. Sarah, do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd signed Derek's paper? If I'd just given up the farm and trusted him? You mean besides the fact that you'd probably be dead by now? The blunt assessment was jarring, but accurate. Derek's plan had ultimately included murdering me to complete his theft. I mean the broader implication. All the families we've helped, all the systems we've changed. Ruth, you can't think about it that way. You didn't choose to become a victim of elder abuse. You chose to fight back when it happened. Everything else follows from that choice. But if Derek had been a better criminal, if he'd succeeded, then he would have moved on to other victims, and eventually someone else would have stopped him. Evil always creates its own opposition. Ruth, the question is whether good people are brave enough to stand up when their moment comes. Later that night, I called the farm from my hotel room. Tom Bradley's son Michael had been managing the property in my absence, maintaining the house and caring for the animal. It was strange to own land I rarely saw, but it gave me comfort to know it was there. Mrs. Davis, everything's fine here. The new calves are healthy, and the spring planting is ahead of schedule. Any problems I should know about? Actually, something interesting happened yesterday. A reporter from the agricultural magazine came by asking about your work in Washington. Wants to do a story about how your experience changed elder abuse laws. What did you tell him? I told him he'd have to talk to you directly. But Miss Davis, I also told him that what happened to you could have happened to any farming family. These criminals target people based on their assets, not their intelligence or strength. Michael was right. Derek had targeted me because I owned valuable land, because I trusted family members, and because I fit the profile of someone who could be manipulated through guilt and fear. His mistake had been underestimating my willingness to fight back. Michael, do you think the farm community is better protected now than it was 5 years ago? Absolutely. The county sheriff's department has training programs about elder abuse. The banks have new reporting requirements for suspicious transactions, and the Agricultural Extension Office distributes information about protecting family assets. Your case became a teaching tool. The next morning brought news that the Elder Protection Act had passed committee by a vote of 14-3. The bill would now go to the full Senate, where passage seemed likely given the growing awareness of elder abuse as a serious national problem. Emma and I celebrated with breakfast at a diner near the Capitol, Grace chattering excitedly about her field trip to the Smithsonian. Grandma Ruth, the museum lady said, "You're famous for helping people. Are you really famous?" "I'm known by people who work on elder abuse cases, sweetheart. It's a very specific kind of famous. But you help grandpas and grandmas who are being treated mean?" "That's right. Good. Mean people should go to jail." The simple moral clarity of a 7-year-old, was refreshing after years of complex legal arguments and political negotiation. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "I've been offered a position with a private law firm that specializes in elder law. The salary is 3 times what I make with the Justice Department. Are you considering it?" "I'm torn. The private sector work would give us financial security, but it would also mean stepping away from prosecution. I'd be doing estate planning and guardianship work instead of putting criminals in prison." "What does your heart tell you?" "My heart tells me that Derek created prosecutors, not estate planning attorneys. I want to keep putting criminals in prison." "Then trust your heart." "But what about Grace's future? College expenses, saving for retirement?" "Emma, Grace is going to inherit a farm that's been in our family for 5 generations. She's also going to inherit a world where elder abuse is taken seriously and prosecuted aggressively. Which inheritance do you think will serve her better?" That afternoon I received a call that brought both satisfaction and sadness. Vincent Torres had died of a heart attack in his prison cell, ending his criminal career permanently. His network was still being dismantled, but the man who'd taught Derek Morrison how to steal from elderly victims was finally gone. "Mom," Emma said when I told her the news, "is it wrong that I'm glad he's dead?" "I don't think it's wrong to be relieved that he can't hurt anyone else." "What about Derek? Do you ever think about him?" I considered the question carefully. Derek's suicide had ended his immediate threat, but his impact on our lives continued to reverberate years later. "I think about Derek when I'm testifying in court, because his crimes taught me how these schemes work. I think about him when I'm training prosecutors, because his methods are still being used by other criminals. But I don't think about him personally anymore." "Do you forgive him?" "I don't know if forgiveness is the right concept. Derek didn't hurt me accidentally, or in a moment of weakness. He planned and executed a campaign to destroy my life for his own profit. That's not something that requires forgiveness so much as justice. And we got justice for our family. We're still working on justice for everyone else." 6 months later, the Elder Protection Act became law, signed by the president in a ceremony attended by victims and advocates from across the country. I stood behind the president as he signed the bill, thinking about all the families who would benefit from the strengthened protections and enhanced penalty. After the ceremony, Emma and I walked through the White House Rose Garden with Grace, who was fascinated by the security arrangements and the formal protocol. "Grandma Ruth, why are all these people taking pictures of you?" "Because sometimes when bad things happen to good people, the good people fight back and make things better for everyone, like when Derek tried to steal our farm." "Exactly like that. Are you finished fighting now?" I looked at my granddaughter, this bright, curious child who would grow up in a world shaped by the battles we'd fought and won. "Not finished, Grace, but winning." 2 years later, I finally returned to the farm, not permanently, but for an extended stay that felt like coming home. The house had been maintained beautifully, the fields were productive, and the animals seemed to remember me, despite my long absence. Emma had completed her law degree and was working as a federal prosecutor, specializing in elder abuse cases. Grace was thriving in school, showing signs of the stubborn independence that had served our family well in its battles against Derek Morrison. I was 69 years old, officially retired from government service, but still consulting on complex cases. The farm felt like a reward I'd earned, a peaceful place to reflect on the strange journey Derek's crimes had forced me to take. One evening, as I sat on my front porch watching the sunset paint the fields in shades of gold, my phone rang. The caller was a woman named Jennifer Walsh from Oregon, whose voice was shaking with anger and fear. "Mrs. Davis, I got your number from the elder abuse hotline. I think my stepfather is trying to steal my mother's house, and no one will listen to me." I listened to Jennifer's story, hearing familiar patterns of manipulation, financial control, and family division. Her stepfather was using tactics I'd seen dozens of times, refined and perfected by criminals who'd learned from Derek Morrison's confession. "Jennifer, have you documented any of these financial irregularities?" "I've tried, but my stepfather has convinced my mother that I'm just being jealous and greedy. She won't talk to me about money anymore." "What about local law enforcement?" "They said it sounds like a family dispute, and told me to hire a lawyer." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar frustration of a system that still failed too many victims despite all our reforms. "Jennifer, I'm going to give you the name of a prosecutor in Portland who understands these cases. I'm also going to put you in touch with a private investigator who can help document what's happening. Will you help us directly? I looked out at my fields, at the life I'd built and fought to protect, at the peaceful retirement I'd earned through years of battling criminals and bureaucrats. Let me see what I can do from here. If the local authorities need additional support, I'll consider traveling to Oregon. After I hung up, I realized that Jennifer's call represented both the success and the continuing need for our work. The systems we'd built were helping more families than ever before, but new criminals were constantly adapting their methods, and vigilance remained essential. Emma called an hour later, as if she'd sensed that I was wrestling with a decision. "Mom, how's retirement treating you?" "It's complicated. I got another call from a victim today." "Oregon? How did you know?" "Because the Portland prosecutor called our office, asking for consultation on a case that sounds a lot like what Derek tried to do to us." "Are you going to help them?" "I'm already helping them." "But Mom, they specifically asked if the Ruth Davis might be willing to review the case file." I laughed, recognizing the gentle manipulation Emma had inherited from both Derek and me. "Emma, are you trying to talk me out of retirement?" "I'm trying to remind you that retirement doesn't have to mean abandoning the work that gives your life meaning." She was right, of course. Derek Morrison had tried to force me into a retirement that would have been little more than waiting to die. True retirement, the kind I could live with, meant choosing when and how to use my experience to help others. "Tell the Portland prosecutor I'll review their case file." "Already did. It's being messengered to you tomorrow." That night I walked through my farmhouse, touching surfaces and remembering moments, just as I had the night before Derek's attempted arson. But this time, the memories weren't tinged with fear or uncertainty. They were anchored by the knowledge that I'd fought for this place and won. Derek Morrison had tried to steal my farm, my dignity, and my life. Instead, his crimes had transformed me into someone stronger, more purposeful, and more capable than I'd ever imagined I could be. The farm would always be here, representing 4 generations of honest work and family dedication. But my legacy now extended far beyond these fields, to families across the country who were safer because one evil man had underestimated one stubborn farmwoman's willingness to fight back. In the kitchen where Derek had demanded I sign away my life's work, I made myself a cup of tea, and opened my laptop to begin reviewing the Oregon case file. Some battles, it seemed, were worth fighting forever. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.